And can someone just give me a wave if they can see the screen, or just prove that you're still awake? So I've got quite a short presentation on academic integrity. Just to set it in context first, I'm going to summarize the approaches and the changes in approaches to academic integrity, possibly at the risk of telling some of you what you already know. But then possibly the most useful part of this is that I've pulled together a few resources that I thought might be useful or interesting, or both. I did come across an interesting example when I had a quick look through the news this morning to see if I could find any up-to-date examples to use. And as luck would have it, I found one that was actually in the news this morning. This was a study in Australia. It was a parliamentary inquiry that commissioned accounting academics. So there's our example, to look at the behavior of the big four consultancy firms and make recommendations on regulation. And unfortunately, these academics decided to use Google Bard to do most of their work for them, not appreciating that Google Bard actually makes things up. So their report actually contained a whole load of false allegations against the big four, accusing them of falsifying audits for clients that had never, for companies that had never been audit clients for them, and so on and so forth. There's an interesting quote from the academic that's in charge of this, explaining that he now understands that things produced by Google Bard aren't reliable. Great. That's progress. The interesting legal twist to this is, of course, because this is for a parliamentary inquiry, they've all got parliamentary privilege. So these jokers can't even be sued for what they've done. But there was almost, I couldn't actually have planned it better than to get a great example of this morning. So I'll just leave that there in the context of it, if you can Google this and read the gory details of it later on. But it's quite a nice way of putting academic integrity in context, because when we think of academic integrity, we often think of university policies around academic integrity. In the context of accounting programs, obviously, any members, either qualified or trainee members, will be bound by the institution's code of ethics that demand things like honesty and integrity. And of course, one would think that an individual would have their own principles where they decide on what behavior they think is appropriate and not. So there is a kind of interplay, I think, between three different factors here, certainly when we're looking at this in the context of accounting. I tried to find a couple of good quotes about academic integrity to summarize it in one sentence. And I found this quote actually from the University of Kent's website, that academic integrity is a commitment to approaching your academic work honestly, which is kind of an interesting take on this, because it suggests that intent is actually quite important when judging someone's behavior. The more I looked at Kent University's website, the more I quite liked the way they'd explained academic integrity. So if you're looking for resources, then I'd maybe suggest going there as well. There's quite a nice user-friendly explanation of academic integrity there, including a very quick and simple way of saying, what does academic integrity involve? At a very basic level, it's completing your own original work and attributing and acknowledging your sources when necessary. And the university then goes on to suggest how you will develop good academic practice. So the issues that they bring up that they define as good academic practice are really what we'd expect to see there, but it's interesting that they've combined the idea of good academic practice with academic integrity, the implication being, if you do this, you're unlikely to be accused of academic misconduct because you will be working in a good academic way. they also map key academic skills that they expect students to develop over the course of their program, including reference skills. Obviously there is a fine line between plagiarism and poor referencing skills very often, and depending on the experience and position of the student, one might take one or other of those views. But I bring that up as an example just because I thought the whole thing was explained quite well, and there was some quite useful resources there that people might decide to use. I think it's fair to say, certainly I've noticed this in a few institutions I've been involved with, that the approach to academic integrity and academic misconduct has certainly evolved, especially over the last few years. Certainly, I know at Winchester we actually changed our academic misconduct policy into an academic integrity policy. In other words, we turned the whole thing round from these are the penalties for academic misconduct to this is how we encourage students to develop academic integrity. So moving from the approach where we wait for someone to do something wrong and then assess a penalty on them, to the approach where we try to build up those skills almost to stop the problem before it happens. So when I went looking around different university sites, one of the ones I looked at was Monash University, that uses what it calls the education prevention discipline approach, which is that most of your effort should be going into education. So you get students that want to do the right thing and are capable of doing the right thing. Less of your resource should be going into prevention, but some should be going into preventing people from academic misconduct. And then if all that works, relatively little resource needs to go into discipline, because you won't have as many academic conduct cases in the first place. That's the grand theory. Anyway, that the focus is on education and prevention rather than waiting for someone to do something wrong and then punishing them. I won't talk too much about AI because it's a huge subject in itself, but it's obviously an unavoidable subject in the sense that students are now turning to AI more, and its use in cases of poor academic mispractice is increasing. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of academics have been worried about students using something like ChatGPT to get away with cheating more easily. I think my take on this, for what it's worth, is that something like ChatGPT doesn't make cheating possible where it wasn't possible before. It just makes it cheaper. You have traditional cheating where information is plagiarized by being copied either directly from somewhere or pasted together from other work, whereas what ChatGPT does is to pull content from all different corners of the internet to form brand new answers that aren't derived from one specific source or even cited. So whereas in the past the student might have to find enough money to pay someone, a human being, to write their essay for them, now all they've got to do is to cough up a monthly subscription to ChatGPT. And in a way, it's democratized cheating. It may have made it more widespread, but I don't think it's made possible anything that was impossible before. The example I've put on here is a good example of a university responding to developments in technology. They changed their academic misconduct description from work using someone else's language to work using someone or something else's language, and made several other edits to that policy to make it clear that large language learning models and AI models were in the list of things that you had to attribute to using. Interestingly, I managed to find a quote from OpenAI. We don't want ChatGPT to be used for misleading purposes in schools or anywhere else, so we're already developing mitigations to help anyone identify text generated by that system. And now I don't know. I'm certainly no expert in this area, but I would understand that to mean watermarking. So putting cues within ChatGPT's output that tell other systems that it's come from ChatGPT. Now, there's been rumors that ChatGPT, that OpenAI would put watermarks in the answers. Now, it's not clear they will, but this probably hints that as of now they haven't. Whether they will or not, whether they can put foolproof watermarks in there, there's the open question. So that's a kind of very brief summary, if you like, of the different approaches to academic integrity. And obviously, some institutions take academic integrity more seriously than others, and UK universities seem to run the whole range, including the standard penalty being submit the work again for a minimum pass mark. So effectively, no real penalty at all. If you think you're going to fail the assignment or not have time to write it, you've effectively got nothing to lose by cheating, because all that happens is you get told to do it again for the minimum pass mark. And then maybe at the other end, we have professional bodies where cheating can get you banned for life. So there's the whole range of things. I did, of course, find when I was looking at different approaches to catching students that have been caught and different approaches that educational institutions take, I did try to find an extreme example. And I found it predictably enough in Portland, in the States, in high schools in Portland. Their policy now states, and I quote, "Not all students have the environmental conditions or support needed to complete schoolwork," unquote. So the official policy in Portland schools now is that if a student doesn't submit work, or if they cheat, they don't get 0, they get the new minimum awardable mark, which is 50%. Because it's thought too harsh to award 0 for work that doesn't exist. I can't really say anything on that without getting myself into potentially more trouble, so I'm just going to leave that quote there in all its naked glory, and move on to suggesting a couple of resources that I thought might be useful. So the first one is the International Centre for Academic Integrity. I'm going to share these slides afterwards as well, so all the links will be in there, which identifies these 6 characteristics that they say goes into academic integrity. Couple of useful things in there. There is a guide on how to create a culture of academic integrity. And there's a few things in there that stood out at me as being particularly interesting. Fairly obvious things like develop and publicize clear, fair academic integrity policies, articulate how a culture of academic integrity supports the institution. But also some key ones, I think, which was a suggestion that academics should re-envision pedagogy, which is the point that we were making earlier about us thinking what our assessments should look like, hinting that we should be making our assessments more foolproof, I guess. And interestingly, support those who follow the policies and uphold standards, which is clearly a hint at institutions that make life more difficult or more time-consuming for people that uphold the standards. There is an interesting project which this centre is doing called the Bridge Project, which is reporting at the end of 2023. It's an Erasmus supported project. One of the outcomes of this will be open educational resources that I think would be quite useful. Now, they are supposed to be reporting back at the end of 2023, so it's worth checking back on that after then, and there will hopefully be some resources there. This centre does quite a lot of work, in particular funded work, so there's quite a lot of resources there as well. The other one, oops, sorry, where am I? Yeah, so that was, sorry, I've mixed the two up. This was the European Network for Academic Integrity, which has got almost the same website, but with .eu at the end. They were the one doing the bridge project. And again, they're quite good at getting funding for these sorts of things. With almost marvelous inevitability, they've also got a separate project where they are mapping academic integrity as a key competence for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you can imagine how many acronyms are flying around all over there. There is a conference organised on the 15th of December 2023. It's an online conference. It's free to attend. It's got the rather mouthful of integrity, open science, and artificial intelligence in academia and beyond, meeting at the crossroads. So if anyone's short of something to do on the run up to Christmas and not enough marking to keep you busy, then that might be worth attending as well. It actually looks like it's going to be quite an interesting conference, and there's I put the link on there as well that you could use for that. So I appreciate that's a little bit of a whirlwind setup on academic integrity, but hopefully there's some useful resources in there and some jumping off points as well if anyone's in the position of having to think about this. And that's pretty much it. I'm happy to take any burning questions at that point, but I'm also conscious of time. And yes, I do use that line in class if I don't want to answer any students' burning questions. But if anybody really wants to ask me a question, then please do. Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Nick. And I realise that